Tonight is the 35th anniversary of Diane Ream's time on WAMU, so that's where I'm going after this. Woo! We at American University are very grateful and a very active part of the Washington community, so we are very pleased to be hosting this first mayoral debate. And in it we have, I'd like to thank, first of all, 3 co-sponsors who've worked to make this happen. The Kennedy Political Union, which is one of the oldest student-run lecture organizations on the campus. The Palisades Citizens Association. And Ward 3 Vision. I was going to ask you to applaud, but I'm not going to do it now because you already have, all right? Now, it's my pleasure to introduce someone for whom an introduction in a political audience probably isn't necessary. But for nearly 40 years, Tom Sherwood has been reporting on politics and life in the District of Columbia. And in those 40 years, he has brought great insight to his work and certainly is among the finest of those in journalism who takes a deep interest in our District of Columbia. So Tom, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, President Curley. I actually wrote more for him to say. Tonight, the panelists are Clinton Yates of the Washington Post, wave. Kavitha Cardoza, sitting right here, and Patrick Madden of WAMU 88.5 Radio. Now, let's all at the same time welcome the 3 candidates: Democratic nominee Muriel Bowser, Independent David Catania, and Independent Carol Schwartz. Apparently, Muriel has dropped out. No, hey. Hey, Joaquin, control your group over there. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Nice maneuver. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I use that term loosely. Henry Ford often said, "Don't find faults, find a remedy." Anybody can complain. Tonight we look for remedies. It's going to be less rigid than most forums you attend. We're asking the audience to respect the candidates, all of them. We don't get much respect on Capitol Hill, but we can respect ourselves.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Being mayor is chaotic, day to day. It's like living inside a popcorn popper. And that's our forum tonight. 1 minute opening statements, 1 minute closing. In between, open season. Candidates generally will get 1 minute to respond, but the panel may extend the questions and jump in at any time. Everyone, the candidates, please look in front of you, must pay attention to the big red stop sign that's right down there for our timekeeper. I'm going to try to let everyone have a say, but no monologues. Opening statements, alphabetical order. Ms. Bowser, you're up.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Muriel Bowser, and I'm pleased to be here to talk to you about the future of the District of Columbia. I want to thank all the hosts, American University, my alma mater. Let's hear for the wonderful American University. I'm glad to finally get on the stage with Carol and David. Let's hear from my opponents. Thank you. And I'm really proud to be here to talk about the progress that we've made. DC is such a different city than the one I grew up in. We're growing, we're attracting businesses, there's an excitement in the city, and we're really moving in the right direction. But we know we won't meet our full potential as a city if we leave people behind. Our campaign for the last 18 months in every corner of the District of Columbia in all 8 wards has been, how do we grow the prosperity of the District of Columbia to help, to assist, and to touch every Washingtonian? And that's why I'm running for mayor. I'm ready to attack the problems that face us and the challenges of a big growing future. No other mayor in the history of our town has been able to not only think about our city, but grow how we will grow as a region and how we will touch the nation and the world. We can and we will make sure that we're improving our schools. We can and we will make sure we're growing our middle class by creating and preserving jobs that help people, jobs that allow them to sustain a life in the District of Columbia. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about.
Did it work? It worked? Okay, just a minute's a minute, timekeeper. Okay, Mr. Catania, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. On November 4th, we have a big choice to make in this election. Who on this dais has the experience, the values, and the vision to secure our city's future? One thing is sure, the campaign starts today. For the last 16 years, I've gotten up every morning and I have ran towards the city's challenges, not away from them. And I'm proud of a record that touches every corner of this city. For instance, this year, the largest investment in at-risk funding in our city's history, I was proud to make possible. Cutting our rate of uninsured in half, medical marijuana, smoke-free DC, saving our only hospital east of the Anacostia River, and marriage equality. Make no mistake, I have the most progressive record on this stage. On Monday, I released a 126-page vision statement on how we will secure our city's future. I note that some of my colleagues on the dais have done the same. I invite a discussion about how we do just that. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and I look forward to answering the questions and participating. Thank you, Mr. Sherwood.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you, I was hoping that you'd applaud when they all came out. If you applaud every time your candidate speaks, you'll eat up all the time, they'll have less to say. So if you could just restrain yourselves and let them talk tonight, that's why they're here. You don't have to show the real or artificial support for candidates. So Ms. Schwartz, you have a minute for opening statement. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, I'm Carol Schwartz, and I'm going to use my minute to reintroduce myself. I'm a former Board of Education member decades ago, where test scores rose due to my bringing back standardized tests and doing things like Banneker Academic High School. I served on the council in an at-large position for 4 terms and established the Department of the Environment, created a road fund for pothole repair, but obviously it was done away with after I left, and worked very hard on oversight to make sure the city worked better, had the strongest whistleblowers protection law in the country so that we could find fraud and abuse. I'm also a 5-time runner for mayor of the District of Columbia, in case you've been on Mars and haven't heard that yet. And this time I'd like very much to win, and I hope you will give me a chance. I've been gone, not because I wanted to be gone, folks, but because I lost my election due to giving sick leave to workers, something I'm very proud of.
Remember the answers a minute, if you could keep them to that, please. First question, the judge is once again forcing the city to rewrite its handgun laws to allow concealed carry. What do you think of the proposal Mayor Gray and Council Chairman Phil Mendelson are putting to a vote on the council on Tuesday? Mr. Catania, you're first.
Thank you, Tom, for that question. Look, there's no question that we don't want to be in the situation we are in today. We are here because of a constitutional decision made by our Supreme Court, which frankly requires us to address the remedy. I think what the chairman is putting forward, I think, is a balanced and reasonable approach. In other words, giving the chief the discretion to issue a license for those individuals who have a specific stated reason for needing it, and also with the discretion of making sure that in the event they don't have it. One of the things I like best about the proposal, candidly, is it builds on what we know has worked in New York and New Jersey and Maryland. We hope it will sustain congressional or constitutional scrutiny, but there are no guarantees. I think there are a whole host of issues that confront a complicated issue of gun control in our city, and also how we permit a lawful carry. I certainly am in favor of the most strict guidelines we can ever imagine, we can ever impose, and that's where my vote will be.
Thank you very much. That would be Ms. Schwartz will be next.
Well, I just want to say basically ditto. I think that the council was put in a position of having to do something because of the court case that said we weren't in alliance with the Constitution. So I am, proud of the mayor and the council chairman for fashioning something that I think puts us through that needle, that very thin needle we have in order to comply with the Constitution, but at the same time have a very, very strong gun control law. So I'm glad my colleagues are going to have to be faced with that, and I look forward to their votes. I'm sorry I'm not down there myself all these years later to vote as well.
And Ms. Bowser, the chief would have to approve people who carry the guns.
Well, absolutely. Well, I'm one of those people, and I think if we have the fewest possible handguns in our city, the better. And like most Democrats, I have fought for strong gun protections in the District of Columbia. We, of course, have to be compliant with the courts, and we will be compliant with the courts. I think we're moving in the right direction by dictating who can carry. We might also later on want to look further into where concealed guns can be carried. We know licensed guns, legal guns, illegal guns, all hurt people. We know when we have more guns in the home, more concealed guns, we have more accidents, we have more suicides, we have more domestic violence. So I want to work with all of my colleagues, of course, to be compliant with the courts, but our first job in government is to make sure that people are safe on the streets, in the parks, at the shopping centers, and in their homes.
Thank you very much. Just a quick follow-up. Have any of you ever fired a handgun?
I haven't.
I've never fired a handgun, but may I say that the law that Mr. Mendelson is putting forward does address the issues that Ms. Bowser raises. It does say specifically where a gun can and cannot be held, 1,000 feet from schools, not in government office buildings, not near the National Mall, and not in areas of sensitivity regarding elected officials and prominent figures in our city.
And that's like every place in Washington. I think that we can make that argument, can't we?
Right.
Well, I agree. Yeah. I absolutely agree. I just wanted to make the record clear that the law does contemplate some of the concerns raised.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do not want to make a rule that you have to be quiet during the whole damn thing, but I would appreciate it. I would appreciate it. We got a lot to ask here. We know what the applause sounds like. Let's move on. Clinton Yates to the Post.
I just want to preface my questions with the fact that personally I'm here to learn a little bit more about your overall philosophies on life, not just politics. I think that's something that's important to a lot of voters because we hear the same things about policies over and over. So what I'm going to ask you are not necessarily things that relate to everything you've heard before, but my first question is a bit of a switch up. It's about transportation. If your car were taken away and you had to choose one thing for the rest of your life, would it be public transportation or bicycles?
Are you asking me?
Do I
All
go
of you.
first?
Either one. You could take a minute.
I think Ms. Schwartz could go first.
Well, years ago I would have said bicycle. Now public transportation, I use it a lot, and I think we have good public transportation in town. I've also been walking a lot, and it's certainly made me feel really good. And those of you who don't do it, do it.
Oh,
I'm good. Thanks, yeah.
I have a bit of a story. A few years ago, I was going to become a cyclist, and then within 2 weeks of purchasing my bike, it was stolen. And so I always viewed that as a divine intervention to suggest that perhaps I should stay off a bike. If I had to pick, I'd pick mass transit. And it's an important issue that's confronting our city. Look, we're expecting 140,000 new residents over the next 25 years. And unless we confront this head on about how we're going to tackle multimodal transportation, we're going to choke in our streets. We simply can't build enough roads to build the capacity that the future demands. This is a serious issue. It demands attention. And I think every one of us needs to be invested in making sure we find solutions sooner rather than later.
Well, Clinton, I spent a good part of my adulthood focused on how to get people out of single occupant vehicles and into public transit. We know that we are a growing city. We will be a city of 800,000 people again very soon. Many of you came through Ward Circle to get here. It took you a little while, didn't you? So with another 150,000 people, there simply isn't enough room for everybody to drive. And I have been a public transit user since the time I grew up in North Michigan Park, walked to Fort Totten to catch the train to get to high school. And I actually now prefer to ride the bus. And as much as the investment that we need to make in our public transportation system, the metro system needs $26 billion just to keep up with our growth. We have a streetcar plan that's on the table currently that costs $1 billion. And we have a city whose needs are changing. Not only are we 150,000 more people in a short time, we stay up later, we work later, we're working in different places. So our investment in the bus and making sure that the bus moves through traffic, that we're considering busways and priority transportation is really going to be key to how we all enjoy a quality of life moving forward.
So to be clear, nobody chose bike.
So,
No? Okay. Well, just making note.
Clinton, that's
Just
a
making note.
fair point. I mean, that's a fair point. I mean, look, you ask us individually, but I think it's important to have a conversation around the economic development aspects of bicycles in our city. Every bicycle on the road takes a car off the road. When you look at what are young people especially doing who were spending 10, 15, 20% of their income on car payments and gasoline, what are they doing with that money when they forego that for public transportation or bikes? They're investing it in retail, they're investing it locally. It is an economic development engine. The important thing I think we have to do is have a public campaign similar to Vision Zero rather, that came out of Scandinavia, that focuses on safety and certain core values of human life, and how we have a system where bicyclists, pedestrians, and drivers all use our public space safely and conscientiously.
Thank you very much.
but let's just look, may I add to that conversation. When I first got involved in transportation planning, I spent a number of years working in downtown Silver Spring. And it really wasn't that long ago that we didn't even have bike racks on the fronts of our buses. Look how far we've come, that many people, forward-thinking, have made investments in our infrastructure. So it is indeed safer to bicycle. It wasn't long ago when bicycling was only recreational. Now we have really changed the conversation. In my very early days at the Council of Governments, there was hosted a Bike to Work Day, and it was at one place, Freedom Plaza. And now we have Bike to Work Day stops throughout the entire region where people are celebrating and focusing on bicycle commuting. So I'm very committed to making sure that we are continuing to invest in our bike lanes, especially completing once and for all the Metropolitan Branch Trail, and looking at more ways to invest in bicycling. For example, east of the river where there are really very few bike lanes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And,
Well, I just wanted to say that I was on the Council of Governments for many years and headed up the Transportation Planning Board. So I see the distances we have come and having all kinds of options for transportation. I just want everybody and all the various options to abide by the law. You know, so a red light means a red light for everybody, no matter if you're walking or if you're bicycling or if you're driving.
thank you. Patrick Madden from...
So over the past few years, district politicians have made news for all the wrong reasons. In fact, several of your colleagues on the council were convicted of crimes while in office. District voters have a right to know whether their next mayor will be dragged down in scandal. Can you assure us that there's nothing in your past or anything that you'll be doing in the future that will bring the U.S. Attorney down to City Hall and embarrass the city?
I can't wait to answer
What?
this.
Okay. Carol.
And I think the order we're going is Ms. Bowser, that's your turn.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that question. And I'm indeed, as a person whose family has been here for 5 generations, was very embarrassed, just like all the Washingtonians that I bumped into. Sick and tired of elected officials going down to City Hall to embarrass them. Not only to embarrass them, but to take the city backwards. I was very proud to work with my colleagues, as is my kind of leadership, bring people together, see what's important, to make sure that we crafted an ethics law that would send a strong signal to the entire government, whether you were the mayor, a member of the council, or the front desk receptionist at the library. You would be held accountable to a code of conduct, and there would be an independent board of ethics that would hold you accountable. Now, some people said, well, you know, Bowser, we don't need another level of bureaucracy. We don't need that. Well, in fact, since that board has been in place, it's working. It has investigated council members and acted and enforced the law and enforced the codes that are on the books. And I am convinced that over time, that it is going to send a strong signal to the whole government that if you do something wrong, you will be held accountable. But the voters are also holding people accountable, and I'm very confident that we are. I am very confident.
All right, come on, listen, you can be removed if you're going to yell out. We don't want that, all right? I said
As
respect
one of
us.
Mr. Catanga's supporters is screaming out.
All right.
Unfortunately.
All right, next.
Are we responsible?
Next. We
Are
can
we
do it in a
responsible
closed
for
room
our
if you guys
supporters?
would prefer that.
I'm just going to ask everybody
we
that's
got-
here to
we need to
support
go on.
us to be respectful of
Absolutely.
all of the candidates, and I would hope that my colleagues would do the same.
I think that would be the way to go, and they can be removed if they're not. So, Ms. Swartz, I think you're next. No, Mr. Catan, you're next.
Well, I certainly understand the importance of ethics, and having been in government for 17 years, I've seen high points and low points. With respect to what Ms. Bowser mentioned, which is the ethics law, I think it's important to put this in context. What Ms. Bowser did was assemble 10 bills that other people had largely written and add a board of election.
I have to
I'm
correct
sorry,
you
I
on that,
didn't-
Mr.
I
Catania.
didn't interrupt you, Ms.
I know,
Bowser.
but you've said something
Ms.
that's not
Bowser, if you don't
actually
mind.
factual, so I am going to correct you
So
if
there
you do
were,
that.
well, Ms. Bowser, if we're going to interrupt each other, it's going to be a long debate. So let me, if you
Perhaps,
don't mind,
perhaps, but
may I
it-
say my 2 cents and you can
Okay.
say yours? So Ms. Bowser, Mr.
Yes,
Sherwood,
so my-
You'll get a chance to respond if you
Okay,
like.
thank you, Tom.
so Ms. Bowser essentially took a number of bills that had already been crafted by Council Chairman Brown and Council Member Che, and she assembled them, and she put on top of it this Vega. But what it did do was it missed the most important issue, as far as I'm concerned, which was campaign finance, and that was punted to a colleague, Mr. McDuffie, to finish. Make no mistake, we certainly have had a lot of people color outside the lines in our government, but what we really needed is law enforcement. We needed an independent prosecutor to enforce the law. Another board without the ability to prosecute is simply another board without the ability to prosecute. In 1997, I started the effort to
Mr.
create an
Catania, I'm
elected
sorry.
attorney general in our city. Ms. Bowser last year voted to delay its implementation, and once again voted this year to weaken the attorney general.
We have time, people up here, thanks.
Ms. Bowser,
Ms.
I think
Bowser, you have a
your
response?
supporters are now engaging in the
You have a
very thing you
response,
admonished
Ms.
mine
Bowser?
not to.
Yes, so
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make it perfectly clear that we put together a bill that's the strongest bill that reformed the ethics regime in the history of the District of Columbia. It in fact created an independent ethics board that has all kinds of investigatory powers. What it said was that an investigation couldn't go into a black hole and die there. There are timelines, referrals that have to come over to the city council in some cases, and in other cases be referred to other bodies, and there's always an action. This is a board that's going to work for the residents of the District of Columbia.
Thank you.
And what it needs
Ms.
is
Schwartz?
someone to actually enforce
Ms.
it,
Schwartz?
an elected independent attorney general.
Mr. Schwartz?
Well, first of all, a law was passed, and my former colleagues voted for it, and that does away with the LLC loophole. But unfortunately, they made the effective date be January 1, 2015. So that means that this election, that those loopholes are still wide open. And they've both been driving their cars through those loopholes. And you know what? They don't have to. January 1, 2015, you have to do it. But just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. If it was a good law, just decide voluntarily you wanted to abide by it. I'm abiding by the law you passed because I think it's a good law. Those loopholes that corporations have 10, 12, 15 subsidiaries, and each of those can give 2,000. The main corporation can, and all the subsidiaries. They're the same people, getting the same money from. So no loopholes were closed. You all should have done it. We have to lead by example.
Patrick, do you have a follow-up, or should we move on?
Let me follow up just on the ethics thing. The current mayor, hasn't been charged with any crimes. But if prosecutors do intend to charge the mayor, do you think they should wait until after January 2nd?
Ms. Schwartz, why don't you start?
Well, I think they should do it sooner rather than later, because I think that we want to know. I mean, I found what happened to our present mayor, where his name was sullied in every way, constantly sullied, and then they haven't brought anything. And I always wanted to stand up and scream, either bring it or shut up already. and so I think if there's something to bring it, or leave the man alone.
Ms. Bowser? Ms. Bowser?
Well, I obviously don't have any say over what the U.S. Attorney does, and I have said all along that he should follow every lead and make sure he's holding everybody who's responsible accountable. And whatever timeline that is, that's the one that he should follow.
Mr. Catania, you and Ms. Bowser both called on the mayor to resign. If he had to resign, it would disrupt the whole government, the transition. Whoever wins the mayor's race, the chairman would have to become the acting mayor for a couple of months. It just seems like a mess. What do you think?
Well, Mr. Sherwood, I did ask and call on the mayor to resign right after the allegations of a nearly $700,000 shadow campaign came to light. This was on the heels of so many other scandals in our city. And I thought that having this long, drawn-out, protracted investigation and potential trial would be disruptive to our ability to govern ourselves. So at this point, I thought the timing of the prosecutor's decision was rather suspect. What some have referred to as Machen Monday, right before a primary, when one of the mayors, the head of the shadow campaign, was essentially hauled before the court for the settlement. I think it did have an effect on the election. And I think at this point, it doesn't matter whether the U.S. Attorney goes forward or not. We don't have a say in it. I do believe that the timing did affect the April primary.
And do you think he should wait till after the mayor leaves office if he has any charges to bring?
I think it's very important that if there is
10
something...
seconds.
I'm sorry?
Just very quickly.
I think yes, absolutely.
Okay, good. All right.
My turn.
Kavitha.
I want to go to talk about education. Candidate Bowser, some critics say your slogan, Alice Steele for All, is just a campaign platitude. And I did a story several months ago where the principal of Alice Steele said, you can't just plop down this model anywhere and expect it to work. How would you respond to that?
Well, what I would say, Kavitha, and I certainly never suggested to anybody that you plop anything down anywhere. What I said is, if you live in the District of Columbia in Ward 5 and Ward 4 and Ward 8 or any ward of our city, you should expect to have a robust middle school that your child could attend. It would have great leadership, a great building, it would have a wonderful core curriculum, and it would have extracurricular activities, and it would be safe. And that is the model that I intend to follow to transform 4 middle schools across the District of Columbia.
Well, I'll go to Ms. Schwartz on the same education. Ms. Schwartz, in 2007, when Adrian Finty got control of the schools, you were on the council, and you asked the council to let the school board have 3 more years before a mayoral takeover. Has the mayoral takeover been a success?
Well, I voted against the mayoral takeover, as did Phil Mendelson. There were only 2 of us who voted against it. And I knew the status quo needed to be changed. I, have worked very hard on education for my entire career. I'm a special education teacher. My children went nowhere but the DC public schools. And I was on the Board of Education, as I mentioned earlier, where real change for the better took place. So this is a real love affair in my life, is education. But I did feel that we have so little democracy in this city, so little, and that our first elected body, starting in 1968, the Board of Education, should not have been pushed asunder. And the takeover plan did exactly that, just put them off into the pasture with a little advisory function and did away with the election. And so I could not in good conscience vote for that. I think we could have gotten to the same place of real reform without doing away with another elected body. I did put in to the bill, though, that in the future, it had to come back to be an election.
Thank you.
And thank goodness it did.
Ms. Bowser, I want to follow up on this education and get this out of the way here. You
Get out of
suggest...
the way.
Mr. Sherwood, may I respond?
Well, I asked her. I was going to ask you another question
sorry.
about it.
I was just wondering if I was going to get included in the education
Are
discussion.
you okay? I'm not, I'm
Well, yeah,
not sure.
you've had a year and a half
All right.
experience, of course.
On the
But, and
I didn't hear that. Does that require a response?
And let me, in fairness, let me respond. I became the chairman of the Committee on Education about 20 months ago. And in the intervening months, I've had one-on-one conversations with 144 of our school leaders and have spent 3 entire months in our schools. I've ended social promotion, the biggest investment in the history of our city to narrow the achievement gap, $80 million, and have tackled special education for the first time in 40 years. I don't believe it's fair to be derisive or belittling or demeaning of what has been an intense and important effort to make sure that every child in every neighborhood has a chance without exception. That's why I'm running for mayor.
Thank you very much.
But if I might, may I add something, Tom?
Yes, you
Because
may.
what I hear when I'm out across this city talking to people at their doors, at meet and greets, at the grocery stores, is that they want educators to run the schools. They don't want MC Dean's lawyer running the schools. They are concerned that an idea might come up this time that's untested, unproven, and may not have any impact on a child's educational career. What we hear when we're across this city is that the education team should be running our schools. And that is why I approach the schools to say, yes, we should have mayoral control, accountability of the schools. Yes, we have to make sure that the organization of the schools works. Yes, we have to have a strong chancellor with a big vision, and we have to hold her accountable. And that is why I'm supporting moving forward with our schools, not taking the chance on ping-pongs and leadership, and looking at what's the problem. We know we have to fix our middle schools. We know that we have to have a better coordination with our public charter school sector. And that is how I'm going to proceed
Mr.
with
Sherwood,
transforming
let
our
me
schools.
just say this. I agree completely that we should allow our educators to run our schools, and that's why I didn't move a single measure without having talked to 140 of our school leaders. Ms. Bowser, you voted for every one of my measures, every last one.
Thank you.
And with respect to the Alice Deal for All, when you ran for council in 1997, you promised to make education your #1 priority, and in 7 years, you introduced a sense of the council resolution with no specifics, no plan.
And in
simply
7
a
years,
platitude.
Mr. Catania, again, let me correct you. When I know exactly why I ran for council in 2007, and it's the same reason why I'm running for mayor. I promised then, as I promise now, that I will work hard every day to make sure we expand school choices, not just for a few, but for all the residents of the District of Columbia. I said
Well,
then,
and in
like
se-
I
and in
said,
7 years,
excuse me,
you've not
I
introduced
said
a
then,
single
and like
measure,
I
nor
said
is there a
now, that
footprint
I
on
am
the
going to
subject.
focus on the underserved communities, not only in my ward, but across the city.
Well, what is
I
enormously
said then, as you,
frustrating,
excuse me,
Ms.
you
Bowser,
mentioned
is
why I
that when it
ran for
comes to the
council, and I
at-risk
am going to
students-
finish
Time,
why I'm running
time,
for mayor.
time.
Wait,
Now,
Ms.
let me
Bowser,
finish.
it is- let me
Allow
finish.
me to finish,
I'm
Mr.
calling
Sherwood.
time for the stop because this sounds like crossfire.
Mr. Sherwood,
Mr.
when she
Catania,
suggests that I am
Mr.
not
Catania,
concerned about
please
at-risk
stop.
children, it is
All right.
I who funded the measure.
It sounds like we need a class on behavior. This is an important subject, so I want to continue it, but I want you guys to at least respect each other here because I don't want the crowd to yell. One of the big issues in education now is the boundary matter. It's very important to the parents who are trying to decide what they're going to do with their children, some who are just not even in school yet. On the boundary change plan, which has not been changed in 40 years, you, Mr. Catania, have said, let's press the pause button and take another year to get the schools ready for the whatever upheaval comes with moving
Sure.
schools around. Ms. Bowser, you have said you would scrap the whole project that the mayor came up with and start over.
That's not what I said. That is not what I said. I
don't
know
get the
that's what
quote
was
out. Well,
reported,
let me
but that
just
is
give you
not
a
what I
chance.
said, Tom.
You have said you would start over and not include the chancellor. I think you told the Post that. Is that right? What do you want to do? Just tell us what you want to do about the boundaries.
First and foremost, a process that hasn't been changed in 40 years shouldn't be changed by the outgoing mayor that the voters said, we don't want you making these decisions anymore. The new mayor has to take a fresh look at these proposals. There are a lot of good things in those proposals to build on, and there are a lot of things that we need to change. I want, first and foremost, not to have a system of moving the lines that exacerbates educational inequality. And that's what this plan does.
Well, would you start another task force? How would you move? Would you use the same task force?
I don't think that we need to have another 10-month process. I really don't. I think that there's some tweaks to the plan that we would have an open and transparent process. I would want in my first budget, for example, to make a commitment as this proposal has on the table, something I've been talking about for 18 months, and that's investment in 4 middle schools. So I'm going to step up and make that commitment
So boundaries
right
would
now.
happen when in your administration?
I think boundaries could happen within a year.
Okay. Mr. Catania, you've said push the pause button for a year on education while you fix some of the schools, and we can't build 4 middle schools in a year to
That's
get
right.
ready. So finish your answer.
Parental confidence is key to the future of public schools in our city. Every time we fracture it, we run the risk of losing parents to charter schools, to private schools, and to leaving the city. I think having a plan in place where parents have to start informing themselves immediately for decisions they have to make in December about a lottery next year is too soon. I think taking a year to study some of the things that I agree are very positive makes sense. I think there are other items that require greater attention. Parental confidence is key. In this year we take, wouldn't it be something if we actually called upon our schools to develop individualized school improvement plans so parents would know the choice we're telling them they're going to get, whether they take it or not. A focus to some extent on improving schools needs to accompany line and boundary changes. And I want to just respond one more time. The notion in 7 years, my colleague has not introduced a single measure. She made a comment about me not caring about schools in East Washington. I authored the at-risk weight. The $80 million that's going to make sure that homeless children, foster care children, and children on public assistance get $2,200 more per child is as a result of my work and advocacy this year.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. And now that we've come to the time in the program where you want to talk to each other so much, you got officially a chance.
I actually have one more
You guys
question.
finished?
I actually have one more question. It's a pretty simple question.
Okay, good.
If each of you had to choose one book you wanted every kid in the city to read, what would it be?
Mine would be The Audacity of Hope by Barack Obama.
Why?
I just think that Barack Obama has inspired so much, not only hopefulness for our young African-American boys. One of the most favorite portraits or pictures that I've seen is a picture from the Oval Office where the president is bending down and a little boy is touching his hair. And the president describes that story as saying, the little boy says to him, I wonder if your hair feels like mine. But really what he was saying was, I wonder if I could be like you. And in our city, I want to make sure that we have a focus on how we bring more of our residents along with the prosperity that we're enjoying in this city. And it breaks my heart, the disconnect that we have and the growing disconnect that we are experiencing in this city. So if there's one single legacy that I can leave as mayor, is that we're going to close that income gap. We're going to close that opportunity and hopefulness gap, especially with our young boys of color.
Thank you. Mr. Catania? This is a question I had for everybody, so feel free to go down the line.
Just, you want to mention the book?
I did want all three to answer.
Is that for each of us?
Yes.
Oh, Ms. Schwartz, would you like to go, or I'd be happy to go?
I would want every secondary school child to read The Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens. It's always been my favorite book, and I think it really speaks to the city we have today. And our great boom town, and of course, we all are glad to see the economic development we have. We're glad to see the jobs. We're glad to see new apartment buildings. We're glad to see the cranes. But what's happened is that so many people are being pushed out and left behind. And it really is becoming a tale of two cities. And one of the reasons why I wanted to run for mayor is to bring that to an end. I came here nearly 50 years ago, and I fell in love with the sheer beauty of the city. I also fell in love with its glorious diversity. And not just racial diversity, but economic diversity too. And we're losing that. And
Thank you
I
very
want
much.
to do something about it. So please give me a
Thank you.
chance to
Thank
do
you.
that.
Now, Mr. Catania, this is a good chance for you to name Dream City.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Strike that book from the options.
But you go ahead and say whatever you like.
I'm tempted to have people read this vision book that I put out on Monday. It's 126 great pages, but let me very seriously say that I don't have a particular book. I want to make sure, though, that children have the opportunity to select their own. It isn't for me to tell a child what they should or shouldn't, or to try to instill my values in them. One of the things I've tried to do as chairman of the Education Committee, and I've been criticized for it, was to make sure that we had librarians in every school, and that we're investing in our libraries, both in schools and in our communities. I was criticized for that, accused of meddling, when 22 full-time librarians were proposed to be stripped out of our libraries 2 years ago. I said no, and I was criticized, and I was happy to take the criticism. Look, I'm informed, as we all are, by our own childhood experiences. I was lucky. I was born in this country where equal opportunity and fairness, and if you play by the rules, you can succeed, and I want that for our kids. Every day I get up looking through the lens of my mother, who did not graduate from high school. She dropped out in the 10th grade when her father died, her mother having died at 6. Raising a child as a single parent without a high school education, the only chance I had was my neighborhood library, to pick for myself and to create my own
Thank you.
journey. I want that for every young person in this city.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right, now, again, Ms. Schwartz, you have an opportunity to ask within a minute, and I'm going to start banging the glass a little quicker. 1 minute, you may ask a question of both, or you may ask a question of one of the other candidates.
Well,
Watch the clock, please.
Mr. Catania, I would like to know, you've had a job in addition to your council job that makes $130,000 a year, a job with MC Dean Company, either directly by actually working directly at the company, or indirectly by working at a law firm where you did legal work for them, and you've made about $250,000 doing that every year in addition to your $130,000 salary. And I read somewhere, maybe it was in Janetta's thing or something, where that job you have is a benefit to the taxpayers of the District of Columbia. And I really never really understood that. I mean, I know you got to fly around a lot and maybe you manage 2 or 3 people, but I never really understood how that job would be of benefit to the taxpayers. And I've heard you say it on Kojo's show, and I read it in Janetta's column, and I'd like to hear it straight from you.
Well, Ms. Schwartz, I am so delighted to answer that question. Number one, because it has prepared me. This is a $13.7 billion enterprise, and I'm the only one on this dais who has any substantive private sector experience. You're right, MC Dean had city contracts. This was a billion-dollar company with 30 offices around the world and 3,000 employees. Less than 2% of the contracts involved the city. They were all competitively awarded. I recused myself from every single part.
Didn't you vote for the
Miss-
budget? Didn't
Miss-
you vote
Miss
for the
Schwartz?
budget that had those contracts in it?
Ms. Schwartz, may I complete? May I complete before?
Well, you've interrupted people when they've
Well, Ms.
been
Schwartz,
talking.
just so you know, the budgets that involve transportation items actually, until recently, went outside of the traditional process because they were federal transportation dollars, so they weren't part of our budget, so no, I wasn't. But if I could continue. In addition to serving as a senior vice president of a multinational company with less than 2% city contracts, I also had something someone on the stage doesn't have. A top secret security clearance issued by the National Industrial Security Program, where I had the most thorough background check you could possibly imagine. Now, if anyone thinks we were risking a billion-dollar company for purposes of these contracts, let me disabuse you of that. But Mr. Sherwood, I understand, but I'll gladly cede my time
Well,
in another
why
question.
does the clock
STOP.
goes for us, but
But-
not for you?
But let me just, if I could, Mr. Sherwood, let me finish this.
10 seconds.
One of the things I was responsible for was organizational development. I was responsible for building one of the best design build companies in the world. I was responsible for recruiting,
Mr.
education.
Catania, I'm sorry, that's too much detail for this audience.
Well, the purpose, Mr. Sherwood, is that if you run a large
The question was,
company.
do you have a conflict? And I think you said, no, you didn't, right?
Well, but she wanted to know how it would help me run the city.
It's your
and-
turn to ask a question of one of your opponents.
All right. I'd like to ask.
And you only get a minute to ask, so.
All right.
I'm gonna-
Mrs. Schwartz, you utilized a gentleman by the name of Tom Lindenfeld, who was the same person who's run Ms. Bowser's many campaigns. And until recently, you had a campaign debt to Mr. Lindenfeld. Has that debt been paid in full?
That debt was paid in full, and
When?
the debt was paid. I pay all my bills.
Well, the campaign finance reports maybe tell a different story, so thank you.
Well, yes,
Thank you, Ms.
but I'm
Schwartz.
glad you're taking Mr. Lindenfeld's word for it.
I'm not. I'm looking at the campaign finance reports, which show a continuing debt.
The continuing debt is to me for the loans that I made to the campaign.
So you still owe Mr. Lindenfeld for money?
No,
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I do not.
Well, Ms. Bowser, would you like to ask a
But I'm
question?
glad you're his.
Would you like to ask?
I
I'm glad
absolutely
you're his
would.
credit
You can
guy.
ask a question of some of those media guys if you want to. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
To the
Well,
candidate.
actually, my question is for Carol. I had the privilege of serving with Carol for a number of years, and actually had the occasion to endorse her when her seat was. When she lost in the Republican primary and was going to run as a write-in candidate. And at that time, Carol, I thought it would have made sense for you to leave the party then and run as a write-in as an independent. You didn't. So now I'm wondering why you have left the Republican Party to run in this mayor's race as an independent.
Well, I left in 2013, and I left because the party had veered too far to the right for me, and it became not a comfortable place to be anymore. I stayed a Republican for many years, Muriel, not because it was veering to the right for a while, as we all know, but it was helpful to the city. When Congress, there was a rider put on that banned gay and lesbian adoptions. I was able, because I was a Republican, to go up to the hill and get the rider taken out. And I started talking about my friends who had adopted children, many of whom needed homes, and the loving families. And I started crying. I can't cry on command or demand, but I did. And the rider disappeared that day. So being a Republican was very hurtful to me politically. I probably could have been mayor before had I just not been a Republican. But it wasn't helpful to me politically, but it was very helpful to the city to have one Republican on the council to be able to go
Thank you
up
very much.
and take
Thank
care
you.
of things such as
Thank you.
those banning of those adoptions.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Schwartz, but the candidates are not looking at that stop sign. I'm just going to have to be more rude about it.
Well, no, but
Patrick.
we have to be equally
Well, I'm going to
rude
be
to
equally
all of
rude,
us.
and I know how to do that very well. Patrick, damn it, it's your turn.
In some district neighborhoods, 1 in 3 adults do not have a job. What is your plan for tackling unemployment in DC, particularly east of the Anacostia River? The jobless rate in Ward 8, for example, has remained one of the highest in the country. What would be your administration's plan to get people back to work, and be specific as possible? Councilmember Bowser, start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you for that question. And I alluded to my initiatives and my commitment to really making sure that we're closing the income inequality gap in the District of Columbia. I've committed, for example, to appoint a deputy mayor whose job is to look across our government to help us leverage our investments to help us leverage our investments to get people working, to improve our schools, and to have improved economic development in underserved corridors. For jobs, I want to do a few things. First, I want to look at how we partner with our contracting community to help us employ our hardest to employ residents that have significant barriers. I also want to create within the government what I call a DGS Academy to train DC residents to get ready for jobs that become available in the government itself. We will appoint a workforce opportunity advisor that's going to help us really retool the tens of millions of dollars that we spend every year in job training programs that doesn't currently lead to jobs.
Thank you very much. You want all of them to answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Just go down the line, Mr.
Yes.
Daniel.
Thank you, Patrick. One of the biggest challenges we face is making sure that people actually have the skills to get jobs. And a legacy of a poorly performing DC public school means that on average, when people graduate, and by the way, only 63% of our kids graduate on time, when they do graduate, they're often graduating at a 4th and 5th grade level, which means they don't even have the capabilities to take advantage of training programs often that require a 9th grade education. That's why it has to be the focus, our pre-K through 12. Next, I think we have to acknowledge that we have a large number of ex-offenders who are not getting employment. Maybe we could silence the phone.
Or answer it and put it on
We
the
have,
speaker so we
let
can
me
hear
just
it.
say that, right, they may have the answers, right? That, addressing our returning citizens is a huge issue. Every year, 8,000 people return to our city, half of whom are reincarcerated within 3 years. There's a great model, Newark has a great model that Mayor Booker implemented. It was called Rapid Access to Work, where they hired private job placement companies to make sure people could have access to jobs. 70% of returning citizens have jobs under that system. Today, 4%. We can do better.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schwartz.
Well, one of the things I want to do is expand the summer youth employment program to be after school and on weekends. I think our young people, I think I wounded the microphone when I
They'll make you pay for it. Be careful, Carol.
But anyway, so that's one of the things I want to do. When I was on the council, I chaired the Committee on Government Operations and Workforce Development and worked very hard then to improve our job training. Worked with Kwame Brown years ago to put forward a bill, a law that required those people that got advantages and contracts from the government would hire DC residents and gave penalties to them if they did not do so. Unfortunately, that bill is now in the courts because some of the employers didn't want to do it. But it's a good bill, and hopefully it'll make it through the courts. I think that we have to do adult education as well. I think that a lot of our people cannot get jobs because of their not having the literacy
Ms.
they
Schwartz.
need.
She was
as
going to
well.
ask about adult education. You can follow up the answer.
Oh, okay.
I was kind of disappointed that everyone is talking about children, which is really, really important, or people who can access workforce development. There are approximately 85,000 adults in the district who cannot read and write at an 8th grade level, right? if you, 90% of adult learners, in fact, are below this level. If you don't have an 8th grade level, you cannot access workforce development programs. I would like to hear, I asked this during the debate at WAMU earlier this year, and I didn't get an answer, and so I would really like to hear a specific answer from each of the candidates. What would you do to improve adult education in the city?
Well, I would like to just continue where I was going before. One of the things that I called for in my education position paper was mentioning adult education. And also want to see all of our schools become like community-like schools, where there will be evening classes, it would be adult education, weekend classes, and have all kinds of wraparound services within our schools, and have them be community schools. I also, when I was on the council, I never did earmarks, you know, where you get those sole source contracts you just give out to outside organizations. The only earmarks, I never did one. The only one I did do, or the only kind I did, was direct money directly to UDC to do more adult education.
In fact, UDC is moving away from basic adult literacy. They say they don't want that anymore.
No,
they
I
want
know,
to
but
concentrate on workforce. So are you suggesting that you'd want to revise what their
No,
new
I'm
mission?
talking about what I did in the past. I know
Okay,
they're
I would
moving
like
around
to,
for-
all the candidates, please, to focus on what we can do moving forward.
Well, what I would do moving forward is have, I just told you, adult education within the schools. And I would have our schools in the neighborhood be community schools.
Who would be teaching these classes?
Where we would have adults who teach those classes. I mean, that know how to read, teach those that don't know how to read. Absolutely.
Could we
We'd
move
have
on?
trained
Mr.
teachers.
Catania?
Well, this is, of course, enormously important, and it was informed by my own upbringing, where my mother, as I mentioned, dropped out of school at the 10th grade. I think my mother had a learning disability in addition. And so that has helped inform what my committee did this year, which was to include an engagement center, an adult education engagement center within our budget. We did that by coupling additional resources so these individuals could be themselves identified as having learning disabilities. It does no good unless you actually take the person as they are and develop programs that assist. This is an opportunity for our community college to step up and fill a void. I was really proud this May when I was the only public official in this city, elected official, to attend the graduation of the community college and UDC. I was proud to watch those 700 people cross the stage. There are people in the city who are dying for an opportunity. Having grown up, well-resourced re-engagement centers that take people as they are is a step in the right direction. There's no panacea, and I do commend you for your reporting on the matter. It's going to
Mr.
take
Catania,
resources.
can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Again, the community college is moving away from adult basic education. I am not talking about
Right.
our adults who are at the, high school level, even the
Look-
12th. I'm talking about people who are at the 4th and 5th grade level. DC has one of the highest rates of adult literacy, basic adult literacy. What are you going to do for those people?
I absolutely see the consequences. At a recent visit at Oak Hill, when you're looking at young people who are in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade who are reading on a 1st or 2nd grade level, it is the trajectory to the end of their life. I am well aware that we need to do better. We start with these adult engagement centers. They are very important, and then we have to resource. As mayor, you will have the ability to assign resources for the community college and to expand these opportunities. There's no question we have done a very big disservice to our residents. And so it's going to require the resources. As mayor, you are in a position to do that. You're in a position to expand them. And I look forward to that because too many of our young people, too many of our older residents, candidly, are lacking the ability to gain access to these opportunities because they simply
we
cannot
should actually move on. Candidate Bowser, please, could you answer the question? I would like to hear a very specific answer.
No, absolutely. And we did talk about this when we had the debate some months ago. I believe on the Kojo show. And I think actually Carol was in a similar position as I, is that I want to look at all of our public buildings and figure out how we're getting effective programs in them. The government doesn't do everything. UDC, the community college, can't do everything, but there are already effective programs that are teaching adults how to read, and I think it's important that we find the ones that are effective and fund them. I also think we have a stay model in our city that's working. That is, you use one of our high schools in the evening. The high school is a stay school, and so I would look to see if the stay curriculums could be expanded to include more literacy programs as well.
Patrick? No, Clinton, go ahead.
I asked general questions before, but my questions following up are pretty specific to each person, so I'm going to ask each one to answer. I'm not going to ask them all at once. I'm just letting you know going forward. Mr. Catania, you were in pretty big opposition to the Nats Stadium situation. You know, you look at that team now.
I'm sorry.
To the Nats Park. You look at that team now. They have unified the city on some level. They've got big-time gates. There's a lot of people down there. The Navy Yard area is completely transformed. Have your views changed on whether or not that was a good idea in terms of how that stadium came about in Southeast?
Thank you for the question. My objection was never to Major League Baseball or the Washington Nationals. It was the configuration of the deal. I didn't think it was a self-respecting deal. I didn't think, when Major League Baseball was in the process of selling this team, to ask the residents of this city to bear $700 million while the owners bore no expense. I didn't think that was fair nor self-respecting. Look, in our city, we suffer from a lot of internalized repression. We suffer from a lot of where we'll just take anything. I think grown-up jurisdictions demand something approaching a fairer deal. That's why I support, for instance, the soccer stadium. It looks more of a 50-50 proposition. In the end, will we be fine? In the end, are the Nationals a great asset to the city? Yes. It did leave, though, a bitter taste in my mouth that at the end of the day, our leaders decided that it was okay for us to pay for everything, and Major League Baseball pay for nothing. And we
Have you still
them.
not yet been to the ballpark?
I'm sorry?
Have you still not yet been to the ballpark?
I have not been to the baseball stadium.
Will you go as mayor?
But candidly, I'm not
And will you go as mayor if you
Absolutely.
win?
Absolutely.
Okay. Ms. Bowser, let's go. You played shortstop in high school, didn't you? No, I don't want to. Don't start a
here's the-
story. Don't start a story.
All right, you asked. That was a question.
Look it
So-
up.
no,
Look it up,
so-
Ms.
no,
Bowser.
wait.
No, Ms. Bowser.
I was a left-handed
No,
No,
second
but
baseman.
I have to
You've
follow
held
up
two
on that
public
because
hearings.
because
You've
what
held two-
what has been widely reported is that Mr. Catania wouldn't go to the baseball stadium because he was still sore after the baseball fight, and that just kind of speaks to his temperament and how he will represent our city. And so that is what he's wildly reported.
Well, if I can
I think
respond.
that you want to respond in a gentle, kind way.
It had nothing to do with the temperament. It had to do with the fact that I wasn't interested in going. And I was a left-handed second baseman. For those of you who know, there's never been a left-handed second baseman in the history of Major League Baseball. I was stubborn, and I was quick, and so I was able to play for a while.
Okay.
But Ms. Bowser, I do look forward to going to the stadium as mayor. Thank you.
Good.
All right, let's go to the soccer stadium. The council has to vote on this. The mayor would like a vote before the end of the year. You've held two public hearings.
I have.
And you've expressed some concerns about how the Reeves Center at 14th and U fits in.
Yes.
Have you, having done all those hearings, have you reached a conclusion as where you stand on the soccer stadium?
Well, where I stand is here. We said from the beginning that I want DC United to stay in the District of Columbia. They have been good for our city, and we support DC United. I believe that the mayor has sent down a deal to the council that is a very difficult one, that basically, and they call it a trade, but it's basically a giveaway of the Reeves Center, and nobody will support that. What I've done, Tom, is I work with Council Member Mendelson to include in our most recent budget the ability for the council to get an independent study of the deal. The mayor and the developers were working on the deal for many, many months, and now we need to have an independent appraisal. We
That
expect
appraisal should be out.
the investigation. It should be out by the end of
$200,000.
by the end of September.
End of September?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm not on the council to vote, but I can tell you to give Ackridge for that sliver of land on deserted Buzzard Point, $21 million. And then to sell him the Reeves Center for $55.5 million, when our former CFO years ago estimated the Reeves Center at $185 million in our booming corridor. To me, I would have to vote no. I like soccer. I'd like them to stay, but I would not buy into that deal that gave away our land and paid top dollar
All
for
right.
land, a sliver of land in
Okay.
deserted Buzzard Point.
We're starting to run. I want to ask another sports question. There's a big push. Ted Leonsis is a big push to bring the Olympics 2024 to the Washington region. A very short answer: are you for it or against it, Ms. Bowser?
I'm definitely for the exploration. There's a private group that is doing the study and making the bid, and I think that it can be a competitive bid. I think there's some important things to consider as we move forward. Is first, what's going to be the ask from the residents of the District of Columbia? What's going to be the ask from the surrounding jurisdictions? And also, how can we think about building the facilities, be they the sporting facilities or housing facilities that would live beyond the Olympics and
Mr.
help us
Catania.
meet some of our other needs.
Thank you. When I was in college, I lived in Olympic housing in Munich, and so I can see the multi-purpose use. I think if we do this in a smart way, we can perhaps leverage additional federal resources for infrastructure we need in the city. I'm not looking for a vanity project a la Sochi or Beijing, but one more sensible like London. I think it's well worth exploring.
Ms. Schwartz.
I would not explore it. I think we have, it's nice to have that little time that the Olympics are there, but I think we already have enough traffic, enough building, enough chaos. We are a destination city. We don't really need to go through all of that for that brief time of Olympics.
Patrick Madden.
Everyone on the stage has a lot of experience working on the council. In your opinion, what bill do you think really defines your career as a council member, and how does your legislative record stack up to your opponents?
I'd love to answer that.
Start with.
I think the most defining bill was the sick and safe leave for workers. I ended up losing my career because of it, but it's one I would do all over again. I always thought that people that work, not people that sit at home, able-bodied, able-minded, but people that go out every day to try to take care of themselves and their families. And CVS has 51% of their workers are part-time. Why do you think that is? Absolutely no sick leave, no vacation time, no nothing. And so that bill really touched my heart. Now, my colleagues all co-sponsored it. There were 12 co-sponsors. I didn't co-sponsor it because it was too extreme, because small businesses would have had a hard time meeting those requirements. But I, the lone non-sponsor, took that bill and rewrote it. And I worked with the Chamber of Commerce and the Board of Trade. Listen, I've had less time. You know, I've not jumped in on every
let's not start
question.
arguing over
I would
time.
like to just finish this one. And that is, I worked with everybody, the hospitals, the universities, and made a much better bill.
Patrick.
But because of it, I got targeted and I lost my election. But it is my proudest moment in my very long, very full legislative history.
Thank you very much for paying attention to the clock.
Look, I'm proudest of the work I did to save United Medical Center in Ward 8. I'm proud of the fact that when I became chairman, I took what was a disaster and turned it into something that is making money. When I became chairman of the committee, it was a hospital borrowing pharmaceuticals from neighboring hospitals, borrowing bandages, where the radiology department had been burned out, not hyperbole, literally burned out, where nurses walked off the job for failure to be paid. I'm proud of the city's $100 million investment, which among other things included a Children's National Medical Center run pediatric ER, which sees 40,000 kids per year. When you're the mother of an asthmatic child and you have to take 4 buses to the main campus versus going down the street, that matters. I think it's an important message for who we are as a city. No one in this community would settle for a community hospital that was borrowing pharmaceuticals where nurses would walk off the stage. I was here and I ran towards the bomb while my colleagues, and I appreciate their support, I ran towards the bomb in the middle of the Great Recession, the year General Motors went bankrupt. I worked and I worked and I worked to make sure that residents in 7 and 8 had the same access to high quality care that we have. It's not perfect, but it wouldn't be there but for my work, and 1,000 people have jobs because of it.
Thank you very much.
Well, I would, it's hard to pick one thing, certainly, because I've spent 7 years on the council in approaching my job, looking at what my duties are in Ward 4 and how we advance our Ward 4 agenda, looking at what our budget priorities are and how we invest in schools and parks and libraries, and we've been able to do all of those things, and what my oversight roles are, and how we have been able to put heat and light on what's happening in the new communities, for example, and how we will transform 1,500 public housing units in the District of Columbia. But I would point to my work on the ethics reform bill as really highlighting my focus on having an open, honest, and ethical government. What I know for sure is residents went out in April to vote for a fresh start in the mayor's office. They want to have leaders that they can trust. And I was proud. It's very hard to take away prerogatives from members of the council, but that's what we did. We subjected members of the council to expulsion rules for the first time. We made sure that the open government office was funded for the first time, so members of the press and the public could have access to public documents more easily. So I'm very proud of the work that we did.
This has been very heavy. Before we get to another heavy conversation, I wanted to ask a quick question, just kind of a yes or no. Have you ever bought anything online?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not
No.
asking what.
No,
Okay.
I like giving small entrepreneurs in the city my business.
Kavitha.
The Intra-Agency Council on Homelessness anticipates yet another surge in family homelessness this year. And we're talking about half of these families are headed by an adult 24 years or younger. How do you intend to tackle this crisis?
Well, I just did a walk in our shoes with 33 organizations, homeless organizations. Have you come, and I think I was the only candidate to do so, come to Lafayette Square and then walk to Miriam's Kitchen and eat and talk with homeless people. Now, this is not a new thing for me. I've done volunteer work for years, including the gospel ministries and others that work with homeless. So this wasn't a new experience, but it was still wonderful to just relive all those kinds of things. And
What would you do for the 800 families?
what I would do is I think that DC General, if it is cleaned up, and I would clean it up, is not a bad place to house the kind of wraparound services I would want to do for the families.
Could you get it in order by this year?
Yes, absolutely. It would be one of my first priorities. And because those families together, you can have the playgrounds, you can have the wraparound services, you can do the counseling, you can do all the things that need to be done. I think it actually could be an ideal facility if it was cleaned up, and how I envision it, I think that we would see real advancement.
Okay, I'd like to, we really need to move on. Candidate Catania?
Thank you. We would have more capacity for our homeless populations had Ms. Bowser not stood in the way in 2011 of the use of the Hebrew home on 1125 Spring Road. She stood in the way, shielded her constituents, and as a result, we have less capacity.
Our constituents.
Ms. Bowser chairs the Housing Committee, and last year we left $100 million of federal resources unspent. Homelessness is a function of a failed housing policy. Of our $225 million in tax-exempt bonds, we left $80 million on the table. We left $30 million worth of value from 9% low-income housing tax credits on the table. We left $100 million last year on the table, and Ms. Bowser, while she could have 2 hearings on soccer, couldn't find it in herself to have one on this subject. When there's $100 million available and unspent in a homelessness crisis like we have today, it demands at least one hearing.
Councilmember Catania, could you answer my question? Because that answer is not going to keep people warm this December.
But it will.
What would you do for families this December?
Well, if we're going to start planning for this winter, we need to start planning in the spring. And we have not done that. Look, we have the issue of the past, the future, and the now. And the now is, as Ms. Schwartz said, we have to make DC General as comfortable and as accommodating as possible. But we have to be planning now. But what I'm saying is, if we don't start looking forward to tomorrow and using the resources that we're leaving on the table today, this crisis continues.
Candidate Bowser?
Thank you for that question. And let me say this. I don't think that DC General is a long-term solution for families. I don't. And I think that we need to set about having a plan where 500 families can be rehoused and that we have emergency shelters that are scattered. It is
This December?
I'm sorry?
By this December?
No, not this December.
No, I'm talking about the families this December. I mean, they are not looking to next year and the year after. They are worried about their children today.
Absolutely. So I will just give you things. We have to speed up our rapid rehousing program. There's money for it, and what the housing providers need is longer than a one-year commitment. So we have to make that commitment to deal with the emergencies. We also have to make sure that we have a hotel room plan so that we have those in place and that we can pay for those rooms. But not just have the rooms, you have to have services. To Mrs. Schwartz's point, if you just stick people that have a lot of needs in any place, they're going to fail there, and it won't be a better situation. Those are the key things, and we have to have the right people in place that are getting those dollars out the door. To Mr. Catania's points, I think there's a lot of reasons why money didn't get out the door, and that's exactly why we need a fresh start in the mayor's office. The mayor puts the $100 million out, the council funds it. We have had hearings, hearing after hearing after hearing, with excuse after excuse after excuse, why new communities hasn't moved forward, for example.
There's been one hearing. I brought the hearing schedule for the Committee on Economic Development. There was one hearing on new communities, but what we haven't had is an answer as to why $100 million was put on the table, hasn't been spent.
Mrs. Catania, we have
When
to
we
move
had
on.
I'm
sorry.
I had weekly
Mr.
hearings
Catania.
until we had solutions.
I actually have
I
two questions.
apologize.
In
Clinton, go
the
ahead.
interest of time, I'm going to ask these both at the same time. One is for Councilmember Bowser, one is for Ms.
Yes,
Schwartz.
sir.
Ms. Bowser, you went to high school in Prince George's County in the late 80s. At a
I
time,
went to high school in Montgomery County and Prince George's County.
At a time when a lot of families were moving out of the city. How did that experience with you as a young person change how you felt about your hometown? That's one question. I'm going to ask the other one for Ms. Schwartz for later.
Okay.
You spent more than 2 decades in public office. You were out for 6 years. You've been out for around 6 years or so. What do you miss most about DC since 1984 when you first got in, and how has your neighborhood in Northwest changed specifically since then? And I'll ask her to answer hers first.
Me first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so to your point, I think you know my history. My family's been here for many generations. My parents raised 5 kids in North Michigan Park, staunchly middle class, Ward 5 neighborhood. When you talk about UDC, it's not an academic conversation for me because my mother went to school at night, raised 5 kids during the day, and worked at the VA hospital so that she could go from being an LPN to an RN to where she retired as a chief nurse. So that is the background and the ethic of education that I was raised with. My father worked in DC public schools for 44 years, and he said for his kids, he didn't think that our neighborhood schools served us. They put on 2 government salaries 5 kids through parochial schools, from 1st grade to 12th grade. And so that experience showed me that families will make the tough choices that they have to for their kids. And I just wished, as they did, they never complained. They never said, well, I need a voucher. They never said that I don't want to pay my taxes, because they wanted to support good public schools for everybody. But that did color my experience as an elected official, so that families in their situation would have more choices in their own neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about my background because I haven't gotten a chance to. I grew up in a small town in Texas where we lived on the poorer side of town, and they called it the wrong side of the tracks. I thought it was okay, but that's what it was. And I went to only public schools. I started working in a mama papa work clothing store when I was 8 years old. So, I had a background that had lots of disadvantages as well. And I think that probably helps each of us to feel compassion about those who live in those kind of circumstances. My neighborhood, interestingly enough, I live in Ward 1, And my backyard, and I'm on that area side, and that's where I spend my time, is Adams Morgan. That area has not changed so much. I'm going to knock on wood while I say that. But I picked 20 years ago to move to Ward 1 and in the Adams Morgan portion of Ward 1 because I loved it. It represented all that magnificent diversity that I talked about earlier. And Adams Morgan's one of the few areas of the city that if you go in today, it looks like it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. That may change, but I'm very happy to see the diverse population. I go in the Safeway there on Columbia Road. I'm one of the few people that speaks English. I love everything about it.
What do you miss most from DC from the time when you first got into politics here?
What?
What do you miss most about this city from the time that you first got into politics here?
What do I miss most? Well, I'm not down at the Wilson building anymore, and haven't been.
I mean,
for
outside of the
5.5
politics.
years. But let me tell you what I miss. When I go there, I'm on the mayor appointed me to the commission on celebrating the 40th anniversary of Home Rule. Just had a meeting there today, so I was down there in that capacity. I miss the camaraderie. When I was on the council in the 80s, and then, when John Wilson was chairman, and then later when Dave Clark was chairman, and I know some of you are giggling because I'm speaking of a time past, but our past is also important to our future. It's very important to our future. But there was camaraderie. You could disagree on the issues, but you were never disagreeable. Everyone really we were like a family. Now, a family that argued and fought, but there was none of this disrespect. There was none of this isolation that I see now. So I can assure you, if I make it back to the Wilson building in this new capacity, I will very much like to open it up to some joy and some camaraderie once again.
All right. We're almost out of time. Do any of the panelists have a question that requires a yes or no or 10-second answer?
Yes.
Yes, that's a good answer.
We know that housing prices here are going through the roof. Would you be the city has to increase its supply with demand just skyrocketing. Would you be in favor of easing the height limit if you could, or if not, what are some other ways the city would be able to increase its supply?
Well, I don't support easing the height limit. I do really regard our skyline in the District of Columbia, and I steal this from Phil, and I always give him credit because he said it best. He said our skyline is a monument, and it should be protected. And it shouldn't be changed willy-nilly. And it's lasted this long, and I would continue to support it. There is actually a lot of undeveloped land right here in the District of Columbia. So I want to look at all the large parcels at St. Elizabeth's, at McMillan, at Buzzard Point, at Poplar Point, and get those types of developments moving before we think about making any changes.
Thank you. I want to end on time. Thank you very much. A short answer on development. Go
That
ahead.
wasn't a short answer.
Mr. Catania, 30 seconds.
We have a huge housing crisis in our city, and as I said in the previous question, last year we left $100 million federal dollars on the table. Ms. Bowser's response was, well, it's the mayor's job to push the dollars out the door. When I was chairman of the Committee on Health and we were facing an epidemic, but we were compared to third world countries, I didn't just point to the mayor and say, fix it. I held weekly hearings. We had weekly hearings and we turned the epidemic around. In the 8 years I was chairman of the committee, we reduced new infections by 50%, and deaths by 69%. These are real lives. The first year I was chairman, 278 Washingtonians died of HIV/AIDS. By the time I ended, it was 72.
Thank you,
It
Mayor.
takes hard work. We have to put our shoulder to the wheel, and we cannot simply pass the buck.
Thank you very
Mr.
much. Ms.
Catania
Schwartz.
has a very strange way of taking credit for everything. The next thing we know, he's going to take credit for the blue sky and the rolling seas. The fact of the matter is, no single person is responsible for the improvements in our healthcare system. That's just absurd on its face.
Okay.
Well, I don't believe I said I was.
50
in fact.
Hey, we're almost out of time. Come on, people.
Can I get to the height limit?
All right. You guys are, we're stopping at 8:30 whether you're applauding. They're not going to have a closing statement if you keep doing that. I'm just telling you. All right, Ms. Schwartz, will you answer that question? so we
Yes,
can
I'd
finish up?
like, I would very much to keep our height limit. I think one of the great beauties of this city, what it distinguishes it from any other city in the United States, is our height limit. I would possibly, for affordable housing, look at maybe the far-reaching in, like New York Avenue when you come in, where there's no vista, no view. Maybe think about that area for a little rising of the heights, a little raising, I guess, better term,
Thank
of
you
the
very much.
heights in order to not just have development, but to only have affordable housing.
I got one last
which we
question, one
desperately
name.
need.
No, it's got to be a yes
One
or
name.
no answer because we're out
If
of
you could
time.
erect a statue for anybody in D.C., one name, who would it be? Each of you.
Oh,
What,
yikes.
I'm sorry?
If you could erect a statue for anybody in the city, one name, who would it be? You don't got to tell me why.
If I could what?
Nelson
Over the
Mandela.
statue? Oh, I'm sorry, listen, we don't have time here.
That's fine.
Okay. I would ask,
Gotta give
they're
that
going to
one
give their
some thought.
closing statements. I would
I'm
ask,
not
even though you
easy
like the
on those.
candidate, wait till all three finish, and then you can applaud, and then we're going to stop. Because if you applaud, then somebody may not finish their statement, because I'm going to get up at 8:30 and walk out. All right? And so, Ms. Bowser, I think you're first.
I'm first?
Yes.
Well, I wanna-
Closing statement for a minute, please. Watch the clock.
Of course, I want to just thank everybody for your attention tonight and certainly invite you to follow our campaign. It's been my pleasure to go to every ward and every neighborhood in our city to talk to people about what they want to see for our future. Like I said, everybody is pleased with progress. Nobody is nostalgic for the bad old days when we were the murder capital of the world, when we were broke, when we were the butt of every joke. But we cannot be proud as Washingtonians if we don't set out on an intentional pathway to grow our middle class and ensure a pathway there for hardworking Washingtonians across our city. And that's exactly what our campaign's about. If you want to know what kind of leader I'm going to be, you can just look at my history, look at my record, hear my vision, and see the people that are gathering energy all around us. One of the most important things, and one of the things I'm most proud of, is that there's energy around our campaign in all 8 wards of the District of Columbia. We're not running a half-city
Thank you.
campaign. We're running a campaign for all of Washington.
Thank you. Mr. Catania? Mr. Catania?
Thank you, Mr. Short. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Securing our future is more than about labels and platitudes. It's about hard work, it's about intellect, and at times tough love. I'm very proud of the record, notwithstanding comments earlier, that I've been able to assemble through legislation I've authored. There are 30,000 people in our city that have health care. There are 37,000 children who went to school this year with an at-risk weight, and there are more than 10,000 couples who have the dignity of marriage equality. You don't do this by accident. You do this by building coalitions through cooperation and the ability to work with one another. The plan that I put in place, the 126 pages, I think is the most historic, expansive platform in the history of our city on how I intend to secure our city's future. We have incredible challenges that will only be fixed and only be faced if we have the vision and the action, not simply labels and platitudes. I am extraordinarily proud over the 17 years of service. I'm extraordinarily proud because I can look in every corner of the city and see
Thank you very
the
much.
benefits of the work. But I'm really proud of the prospects of running the city, governing the city, and working together to make it even better.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schwartz, 1 minute, 1 minute.
Well, I too want to thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope you will consider me. It's a job I've wanted for a long time, but not for any reason other than to serve people. And also I want you to know what distinguishes me. I have been a volunteer since I arrived here 48 and a half years ago, whether it was tutoring children in elementary schools, whether it was a drug counselor at the Black Man's Development Center And I didn't have money in those days. My husband and I were still paying back his student loans and having a house with one toilet in it. And he used to say, we don't have a pot to you know what in, you know the expression, and you're out doing volunteer work like your lady asked her. Well, you know what? I still am out doing volunteer work. So I think we have to look at somebody that not only gave good service and made the government better, but in her outside time,
Thank you
her
very
little
much.
bit of
Thank
free
you.
time, she was working at the Whitman
Thank you.
Walker Clinic and
Ms.
the
Schwartz, thank
Metropolitan
you.
Police Boys and Girls Club,
Thank you.
and all
Thank
of
you.
those things. Look at what we do all
Thank
the
you.
time.
Thank you. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, it's 8:30. Local
Thank you.
Washington.
Thank you.